The smell hit me before the door even swung open. Cedar and vanilla and the faint ghost of cinnamon, the smell I had spent 4 years building into something people drove across Austin to find. But standing on the sidewalk outside my own bakery on a Tuesday morning in March, staring through the glass at a woman I had never seen before arranging flowers on my front counter, I realized that smell was no longer mine. The sign above the door had been repainted. The font was different. The name was different. Where it used to say Crumb & Co., in the hand-lettered script I had designed myself, it now read, Sweet Layers Bakery, in bubbly pink cursive. The chalkboard menu in the window listed prices I had never set. The custom mosaic tile I had hand-picked from a shop in San Antonio, the one I had spent 3 weekends installing on my hands and knees, was still there. Everything was still there. Except me. I knocked on the glass. The woman looked up, smiled politely, and walked to the door. Welcome in, she said, holding it open like I was a customer. We don't open for another 10 minutes, but you're welcome to wait. I looked past her at my espresso machine, my proofing rack, my reach-in refrigerators. I'm not here for coffee, I said. I own this place. Her smile didn't waver, but something behind her eyes flickered. She reached beneath the counter and pulled out a folder. Actually, she said, her voice careful and apologetic, according to the deed of sale filed with Travis County, the business was sold 8 weeks ago. She turned the folder toward me, and right there, on a bill of sale dated January 9th, was my signature. A signature I had not written. On a document I had never seen, selling the business I had built from a $4,000 loan and a second-hand mixer, while I was lying in a hospital bed 200 miles away. My sister did not just run my bakery while I was recovering. She sold it. Before I tell you what happened next, I want to ask you something. Drop it in the comments. What is the one thing someone in your family did that made you realize they were never really on your side? I read every single one. I did not cause a scene in front of that woman. She was not the problem. She was just the person who had been handed something that never should have been for sale. I thanked her. I walked back to my car. I sat in the driver's seat in the parking lot of a strip mall on South Congress, and I looked at the notification on my phone, the one my sister had sent me exactly 2 months ago, that I had been too medicated to fully process. Hey, just wanted to let you know I've been keeping everything running perfectly. Don't stress. Focus on healing. I've got it all under control. Love you. I had believed her. 6 months ago, I had a laparoscopic surgery that turned into something much more complicated. What was supposed to be a 2-hour outpatient procedure became a 14-day hospital stay, followed by 8 weeks of restricted movement, and no heavy lifting, no standing for long periods, no stress. My doctor had been explicit about the stress part. My sister Vanessa had flown in from Dallas the second day I was in the ICU. She had held my hand. She had cried. She had told my mother that she would handle everything until I was back on my feet. She had power of attorney documents drawn up, the kind you sign when you're scared and exhausted, and you trust the person holding your hand, and I had signed them without reading the full scope. I had given her the authority to manage Crumb & Co. while I recovered. I had not given her the authority to sell it. My car still smelled like the hospital gift shop lotion my mother had brought me every visit. I sat there in that parking lot and I did not cry. I had spent the last 8 weeks crying from pain, from boredom, from the loneliness of being 29 years old and helpless in a rented apartment while my business ran without me. I was out of tears. What I felt instead was a cold, flat stillness, like a lake right before a storm. I drove to my storage unit. Vanessa had moved my personal items out of the bakery's back office 3 weeks into my recovery, telling me she was doing a deep clean and reorganization. My grandmother's recipe binder, the one she had kept for 40 years, in a cabinet above her stove, filled with index cards in her handwriting, biscuit recipes and pie crusts, and the sweet potato pound cake she made every Thanksgiving, was in a cardboard box under a broken bar stool. Someone had stacked a case of canned goods on top of it. The spine had split. 2 of the index cards had slipped out and were loose at the bottom of the box, smudged and creased. My grandmother had been gone for 3 years. That binder was the closest I had to her voice. I held it and I felt something inside me go very, very quiet. It was the quiet that comes right before a decision, the kind you don't walk back from. My family knew I was good with numbers. Vanessa used to introduce me at parties as the one who does taxes with the same affectionate condescension you'd use to describe a kid who's good at puzzles. When I opened my bakery, she had called it a cute hobby. When it turned profitable in year 2, she had told our mother I'd gotten lucky. Nobody in my family had ever bothered to ask what my actual background was. They assumed baker. They assumed small business. They did not know that before I ever touched a bag of flour professionally, I spent 5 years at a regional accounting firm specializing in small business forensic audits. They did not know that I had my CPA license, my certified fraud examiner credential, or that for the last 2 years I had been doing contract work for an IRS criminal investigation unit reviewing financial fraud in the restaurant and food service industry. My name is Maya, and my sister had just committed textbook business fraud against the one person in her family who does this for a living. I set the recipe binder on the passenger seat. I drove to a coffee shop 3 blocks from my old apartment. I ordered a black coffee. I opened my laptop. I started with the Travis County Clerk's public records portal. The bill of sale had been filed on January 11th, 2 days after the date on the document. The transfer of the business license had gone through on January 14th. The LLC paperwork reassigning ownership of Crum & Co. had been submitted January 16th. It had all happened in a 5-day window. Vanessa had not made a rash decision. She had prepared. She had staged this in advance. She had known what she was doing. The sale price listed in the public record was $47,000. My bakery, which I had insured for $190,000, which had equipment alone worth over $80,000, which had cleared $62,000 in net profit the previous year, had been sold for $47,000 to an LLC registered in Dallas 3 weeks before the transaction. I ran the LLC. It took me 4 minutes to find the registered agent. The name meant nothing to me, but the address was a UPS store location in a suburb of Dallas. I cross-referenced it with property records. The address on Vanessa's husband's business registration was 3 blocks away. I sat back in my chair. She hadn't just sold my bakery. She and her husband Marcus had sold it to themselves through a shell company and pocketed the difference between the fraudulent sale price and whatever they'd eventually flip it for, or they were planning to run it under a new name and collect the revenue stream I had built. That explained the rebrand. That explained the new sign. Sweet Layers Bakery. Same location, same equipment, same recipes I had taught Vanessa over years of holiday baking. My business, wearing a new dress. I pulled up my personal bank records next. The $47,000 had been deposited into my business operating account. Then it had been transferred out in 3 installments over 6 days. 2 transfers to a Dallas account I did not recognize. 1 transfer to a Venmo account. I ran the Venmo username. It was Marcus. He had Venmo'd himself my money and left a note that said reimbursement. My power of attorney document had not authorized the sale of the business. I knew this because I had finally gotten a copy of the original from the attorney who drafted it, a solo practitioner in Austin who, when I called and explained the situation, went very quiet on the phone and then said, in a careful voice, that he would need to review his file and call me back. He called back in 40 minutes. The power of attorney I had signed authorized Vanessa to manage day-to-day operations, sign vendor checks, and handle payroll. It did not authorize the sale of business assets. It did not authorize transfer of business ownership. What she had submitted to Travis County was a separate, expanded document, one I had never seen with my signature on it. He confirmed that he had not drafted it. Second forged document. Same handwriting. I opened a new folder on my desktop and named it Evidence v. Carter. I worked for 3 hours. I pulled every public record, every filing, every transferable document. I built a timeline that started the day Vanessa arrived at the hospital and ended the day the new sign went up on South Congress. Then I did what I do professionally. I followed the money with the precision of someone who has tracked it through offshore accounts and ghost payroll schemes for federal investigators. This was almost insultingly simple by comparison. Vanessa and Marcus had not been subtle. They had moved fast and bet on the fact that I was too sick, too trusting, and too far from Austin to notice until it was too late. They had bet on my illness making me soft. They had forgotten that I had spent the last 2 years of my career making sure people exactly like them went to prison. I documented everything. The forged power of attorney expansion. The fraudulent bill of sale. The below-market transaction to a self-controlled entity. The transfer of funds to Marcus's personal account. I screenshotted my own medical records, the discharge summary, the date-stamped photos my nurse had taken for my file, the physical therapy intake form dated January 9th, proving I was non-ambulatory, and in a medical facility in San Antonio the exact day my signature appeared on a bill of sale in Austin, 80 miles away. Physics again. Immovable witness. I compiled everything into a single PDF. I titled it, Fraudulent Transfer of Business Assets, Crum & Co., LLC. Then I called a friend. Not a friend from home. A friend from my CFE certification course, a detective with the Austin Police Department's Financial Crimes Unit who I had consulted with twice on restaurant industry fraud cases. I need you to look at something, I said. It's not a consultation. It's a report. She told me to come in. I sat across from her in a small office that smelled of old carpet and printer toner, and I slid the folder across the desk. She read in silence for 11 minutes. Then she looked up at me. You built all of this today? I've been doing this for 7 years, I said. I just never thought I'd be building it about my own sister. She picked up her phone. I walked out of the Austin PD Financial Crimes Unit 2 hours later with a case number, a detective assigned, and the knowledge that a warrant application was already being drafted. The DA's office had been notified. Vanessa and Marcus did not know any of this yet. As far as they were concerned, I was still a recovering woman in a rental apartment who was probably upset about the bakery, but too overwhelmed to do much about it. I had one more thing to do before the warrants came through. Vanessa had been planning a housewarming party for 3 weeks. She and Marcus had just closed on a house, a 4-bedroom in a suburb of Dallas with a large kitchen and a mudroom. The kind of house she had told our mother she had been saving for. I knew about it because our mother had called me excitedly 2 weeks ago, asking if I was well enough to attend. I had told her I was not sure. I was sure now. Not to celebrate. To deliver something. I drove to Dallas on a Saturday morning. My doctor had cleared me for driving the week before. I wore jeans and a plain white shirt. I had a folder in my passenger seat, next to my grandmother's recipe binder, which I had brought with me for a reason I hadn't fully articulated to myself yet. The house was in a neighborhood where every home looked nearly identical. New construction, stone facade, two-car garage, American flag mailbox. Cars lined both sides of the street. Inside, through the front window, I could see people with glasses of wine and plates of food, standing in a kitchen that looked freshly staged. A kitchen that my $47,000 had helped pay for. I sat in my car for a moment. I thought about my grandmother standing at her stove on Sunday mornings, writing in that binder. I thought about the 14 days I had spent in a hospital bed while my sister was in Austin calculating how to use my power of attorney before I recovered enough to revoke it. I thought about the woman at the counter of my bakery telling me, politely, that I was not the owner anymore. I got out of the car. The front door was unlocked. I walked in. The party was bigger than I expected. 30, maybe 40 people, family and friends and neighbors I had never met. Music was playing. The kitchen smelled of catered food. Nothing homemade. Vanessa was standing near the island in a green dress, laughing at something. A glass of champagne in her hand. She looked relaxed. She looked like a woman who had gotten away with something. Marcus saw me first. His expression went from pleasant to careful in under a second. He touched Vanessa's arm. She turned. For a moment we just looked at each other across that beautiful new kitchen. Maya. Her voice was warm, but her eyes were doing a rapid calculation. You came. I wasn't sure you were feeling up to. I'm feeling great, I said. Recovered faster than expected. You might want to sit down. She laughed. The nervous kind. What are you talking about? Come in. Let me get you a plate. I filed a police report on Thursday, I said. Not loudly. Conversationally. But the kitchen is an open floor plan. And the room had started to go quiet the way rooms do when something shifts. Austin PD Financial Crimes. The warrant for your arrest was issued this morning. The champagne glass hit the edge of the counter. Marcus stepped forward. This is not the time or place. You sold my bakery to yourself for $47,000 through an LLC you registered 3 weeks before the transaction, I said. And I set the folder on the counter. Not dramatically. Just placed it there the way you would put down a grocery receipt. You forged an expanded power of attorney with my signature. You transferred my operating funds to your personal Venmo account. I have the bank records, the forged documents, the medical records proving I was non-ambulatory the day you signed my name, and a forensic accounting trail that any prosecutor can follow in their sleep. I looked at Vanessa. I've been doing financial fraud investigation professionally for 7 years. I contract for the IRS. Did you know that? You never asked. The room was fully silent now. Vanessa's face had gone through several phases. Shock, then anger, then the thing I recognized from our childhood when she had been caught in a lie. The pivot to victimhood. I saved that bakery, she said, her voice climbing. You were lying in a hospital bed. You couldn't run it. I kept it alive for 2 months out of my own pocket. You paid yourself $4,200 from the operating account for your time, I said. I found that transfer too. Her jaw tightened. Everything I did was for the family. You were going to lose it anyway, Vanessa. Our mother's voice came from the doorway to the living room. She had gone pale. What is she talking about? And that was the moment I watched my sister realize that the story she had been telling, the one where she was the capable sister stepping up while the fragile one recovered, was falling apart in front of the people she needed it to hold together. Her hands moved to her champagne glass and found it was no longer there. She's exaggerating, Vanessa said, turning to our mother. She's upset. She always does this. I have a folder, I said quietly, that a Travis County Assistant District Attorney reviewed yesterday. Would you like me to read from it? Or would you like to call your attorney first? I genuinely recommend the attorney. From the front door, 2 officers stepped inside. Detective Reyes from Financial Crimes, and a uniformed officer I didn't know. I had texted her the address 2 hours earlier. She had told me to wait for them before going in. I had almost waited. Marcus turned toward the back of the house. The uniformed officer moved first, and whatever Marcus had been planning to do with that exit, he decided against it. Vanessa Carter, Detective Reyes said, her voice flat and professional, and Marcus Carter. You're both being detained for questioning, in connection with fraudulent transfer of business assets, forgery of legal documents, and wire fraud. You have the right to remain silent. Vanessa looked at me from across that brand new kitchen in that house that my equity had helped furnish. Her mascara was still perfect. Her green dress still looked expensive. She looked like someone who had planned for every scenario except the one where her quiet, recovering sister turned out to be the most dangerous person in the room. Maya, she said, and her voice broke on it. I'm your sister. I know, I said. That's the part that made it a felony. My mother stepped into the kitchen, past the people pressing against the walls to watch, past the caterer standing frozen with a tray of bruschetta. She did not go to Vanessa. She came to me. She looked at me for a long moment, her hands clasped in front of her, and then she said in a low voice, "Did she take everything?" "She tried," I said. "She couldn't finish the job." My mother pressed her lips together and nodded, once the nod of a woman who has understood something she didn't want to understand and has decided to stand in it anyway. The legal process was not fast. It was thorough. Vanessa and Marcus both retained attorneys. There were months of filings and counterfilings and depositions. Marcus's attorney tried to argue that the expanded power of attorney had been authorized verbally. My attorney introduced my medical records and a sworn statement from my own hospital's nursing staff confirming I had been on IV pain management and was documented as non-responsive to complex legal language during the window-in. Question. The verbal authorization argument was withdrawn. The DA's office prosecuted both of them for forgery, fraudulent transfer, and wire fraud. Marcus took a plea to avoid trial, 2 years probation, mandatory repayment of $190,000, representing the fair market value of the business, and community service. Vanessa received the same deal plus an additional requirement. She was barred from holding power of attorney over any family member for 15 years. The LLC they had used was dissolved. The business was formally transferred back to me. The woman running Sweet Layers Bakery was a legitimate buyer. She had purchased it in good faith and was not culpable. The DA's resolution required that she be offered first right of refusal to purchase the business at fair market value or be compensated from the repayment funds. She chose to purchase it. I chose to sell. Not because I was beaten. Because I had decided in that storage unit, holding a split recipe binder, that I did not want to spend the next chapter of my life inside the place where the worst thing had happened to me. I used part of the settlement to open a second location 3 miles east, in a neighborhood that had been asking for a bakery for years. I named it Crumb & Co. Again. I had the sign hand-lettered by the same person who had done the original. On the first morning we opened, I put my grandmother's recipe binder behind the counter in a custom frame, spine repaired. The loose index card slipped back into place, and covered in archival sleeves. The sweet potato pound cake she had made every Thanksgiving is on our menu now. We sell out by noon. My mother came to the soft opening. She sat at the corner table for 2 hours and ate a biscuit and did not say much, the way she communicates love. Before she left, she touched my arm and said, "Your grandmother would have wanted you to fight for it." I thought that was probably the most useful thing anyone had said to me the entire year. I do not speak to Vanessa. Not because I am punishing her, I genuinely do not have anything left to say. The person I thought she was did not exist. The sister who held my hand in the ICU was already calculating. The grief of that is not something you get over. It is something you learn to carry on one side so you can still walk. Some mornings I stand in the back of the new bakery before we open, and I listen to the proofing oven and the particular silence of a kitchen before the first customer, and I think about what it costs to get here. The surgery, the months of recovery, the storage unit and the damaged photos, and the cold realization in a parking lot on South Congress that the person I had trusted most had been operating as my enemy the entire time. And then I think about what I chose to do about it. Not out of rage, out of precision. With the exact tools she never thought to ask if I had. I am 30 years old. I run my own business. I do not hold a family together by pretending things are fine. I do not sign documents I haven't read. And I do not give people the authority to touch what I have built, just because they show up and cry at the right moment. If you've ever had to choose between protecting yourself and keeping the peace and you chose yourself, you already know what I'm talking about. Subscribe. You belong here.